Hi, I'm Dr. Steve D'Agostino, the Director of Online Learning at Fordham University, and this video is about asynchronous online discussions. Those discussions that don't take place in real time, that are facilitated mostly through text. So where to begin when considering having such a discussion with your students in an online space? Well, an initial consideration is to think about, why am I doing this? What are my hoped for learning outcomes? What is the instructional need that drives me to want to create an online discussion space? The next step is to create expectations for your students. How often will this discussion take place? What makes a good response? It's possible that your students will never have taken part in an online discussion before, and they won't know what to do. So all of them will have some experience of having classroom discussions in a traditional face-to-face environment, but when faced with an online discussion that's text-based, their experiences might be limited. So it could be helpful to share a sample discussion with them. Create a sample response, post it on your discussion board, and ask them for feedback. This way, you and your students can collaboratively come up with the qualities that a good discussion would have. This might have to do with the length of a discussion, the tone. What kind of language is your discussion comment written in? Is it academic language? Does it more mimic the kinds of language students would use in a face-to-face discussion? There's a good acronym that might prove helpful when designing an online discussion space for your students, and it's called CHIRP. Checking, helping, informing, relating, and prompting. So let's go through each of these. When you're checking on students, you're determining, are they logging into the learning management system? Do they know what to do? Do they know how to do it? So it's really just understanding their status. Are they prepared to participate meaningfully? The H is helping. So by helping, we're creating spaces for students to express a lack of understanding. So this might be a specific discussion space that's designed for students to post questions. Remember, in a face-to-face environment, a student can just raise her hand or make a face, express some kind of verbal or nonverbal confusion. But in an online asynchronous discussion, we have to create those spaces purposefully. So you may want to say, okay, by Wednesday, I'd like you to post in response to this prompt, something I don't understand is. Then you can ask your students by, say, Monday, to respond to a classmate. Try to help your classmate answer or understand that thing that they're confused about. The next step in CHIRP is informing. And that's really providing students with updates. This is due, that's due, and also providing them with instructional rationales. So when you assign something to students, you want to tell them why you're assigning it and why they're doing it and what the hoped for outcomes are. So we do these kinds of things intuitively when we're teaching. But remember, in an online asynchronous space, we have to do it more deliberately, purposefully, because the students won't know. The R is for relating. Relating means when the discussion is ongoing in the asynchronous discussion forum, how do you keep it going? How do you create and sustain an online community of learners? So you can do this the way you would do in a face-to-face environment. Include people in the discussion who aren't participating, refer to them. Recall their previous comment and comment on their comment. Model effective discussion techniques. The P in CHIRP stands for prompting. And prompting has to do with asking thoughtfully constructed questions. And there are different kinds of questions to ask. A good place to begin thinking about this is, what is the difference between, say, a test question, a homework question, and a discussion question? A test question would be something like, what is 2 plus 2? 4. It has one answer, and it's the right answer. If you ask a question like that, what is 2 plus 2 on a discussion forum, all of your students will simply say 4. And that's not conducive to a back and forth, right? As soon as they say 4, the discussion is over. A homework question might ask the students to refer to some text. 2 plus 2 is 4. Show where in the textbook you found that to be true. But that also is somewhat limiting because once students share that specific information, again, the discussion is over. So a discussion question has to be more open-ended. How do you feel about 2 plus 2 being 4? Do you want to live in a world where 2 plus 2 is actually 4? What might be a better answer that's more satisfying to you? So obviously this is a facetious example, but what I'm trying to get across is you need to create space in a discussion forum for students to express themselves. So there are a number of questioning strategies you can think about. In your discussion, you want to ask thoughtfully constructed questions. A good technique is to think about refocusing questions. Refocusing questions redirect the student conversation. Sometimes in a classroom face-to-face environment, discussions can turn into argument, and this means that students can take sides. They also can engage in approval-seeking behavior, thinking that you, the instructor, has the right answer, and they're going to frame their answers around that supposition. What you want to do is refocus them and think about, well, what are we trying to do in this conversation? Are we trying to construct meaning? Are we trying to reach a shared understanding? Or are we trying to prove that we are correct? So it's important for students to understand what the terms are of this conversation. Clarifying questions are ways for us to restate. So if a student asks a question on a discussion board or makes a comment, you can restate that comment to make sure that everyone understands what the student is trying to say and that the student herself understands what her comment is saying. Verifying questions ask students to substantiate their comment. Where in the text did you find this? Supporting questions are similar, but supporting questions are more related to students' personal experiences. Why do you feel this way? What makes you think that? And finally, redirecting. Redirecting questions shift to another student to make sure people are included. They refer back to previous comments made by other students that may have been more on point, and they're a way for you to make sure that your discussion stays on track. A final technique you want to think about is, what is your presence going to be in the discussion? How often will you comment and respond? What will those comments and responses look like? What is your role in the conversation? It's important to step back in an online discussion, much like you would do in a face-to-face environment, to give the students space to direct their own conversation. This is called lurking. Lurking is when you're involved in an online discussion, but you're not saying anything. You're just kind of watching, seeing where the conversation goes, and then stepping in to use some of the question strategies we just talked about. It's important to remember that a big difference between an online discussion, which is asynchronous, and a face-to-face discussion, which is happening in real time in one another's physical presence for the most part in traditional settings, that you're going to have to be much more deliberate in your questioning strategies, in your modeling behaviors, and in how you guide the discussion. But because the conversation is mediated, because you have time, you can be really mindful about the kind of identity and role you want to assume in that online space. If you have any questions about how to construct and moderate an online discussion, please feel free to email me. Thanks very much.